Hi everyone, welcome to Blue NC, a community blog in North Carolina that comments on liberal and progressive politics.
The blog was started in late 2005, early 2006 by several people, one of whom is a UNC journalism school grad, and has grown to multiple administrators who are moderating the content.
During the 2008 campaign, more than 26,000 page views per day. How the site works is anyone can set up an account, create a profile, a bio, and you are automatically given your own blog. And you can post to your blog about anything you want, whenever you want. And once you've set up an account, you can comment on other posts. Casual visitors can't comment, only members can comment. A handful of contributors on the blog can post directly to the front page or promote other people's posts to the front. And I think there are about 10 people now who have those powers.
So that brings us to our first big question. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that casual users of Blue NC can't post to the front page? And I think you can look at it two ways. Either you can look at it as the people who are have more professional journalism training, know more about what they're talking about, and have more time are the people who are getting to write for the front page, which means that it's not really a community blog and everyone else can't really participate, or it just means that because those people with more training are posting to the blog has better quality, which brings us to what we talked about when we listened to Rivers.
Talk about the mullet strategy, promoting things that are better so that it's business in the front, party in the back. Other features of Blue NC include a frequently asked questions page that helps newbies figure out how to write posts. It teaches you what makes a good post and a good headline. It explains how to tag posts so that people searching your topic on Google can find them. And it includes a Who Represents Me page so that you can find who your legislators are, who represents you in Congress and in the General Assembly.
In addition to the normal posting and commenting functions on Blue NC, users can participate in live blogs with political figures, and any member of the site can start a live blog and then other people pose questions. Notable examples include a chat with former U.S. Senate candidate Jim Neal. He ran against Kay Hagan in the Democratic primary in North Carolina, and he announced that he was gay in a Blue NC live blog, and it was the first time that he had announced that publicly, and it brought national attention to that race.
Blue NC also hosted a live blog primary debate between the two Democratic gubernatorial candidates in 2008, Bev Perdue and then State Treasurer Richard Moore.
Other interesting tools on Blue NC, users can email each other, or they can use a private in-house messaging system that other users can't see.
The site also has a Twitter feed that has more than 400 followers and tweets links to most of the front page posts. A few critiques of the site that I think ought to be brought up are, first of all, the search function is not always super helpful. The site uses a Google custom search, which doesn't always necessarily find exactly what you're looking for. And some of the buttons on the side don't actually seem to exist anymore. You can click, it says that you can click to read forums about just about NC politics or about national politics, but when you click those buttons, you end up with an error message. So what's the purpose of Blue NC? There are multiple purposes for the site. The first is just a place for conversation for progressive North Carolinians in a state that's Barack Obama won the state with just under 50% of the vote in the state. So it's hardly a super liberal environment, and this forms a place of conversation for people who feel like they don't really fit with opinions of their neighbors.
Last year, I interviewed for a separate assignment for another class one of the administrators for the site, and she told me that basically that's her reason for using Blue NC, that she lives in a conservative area and doesn't feel like she can share all of her opinions necessarily with her neighbors, and she likes having this online community of people that sort of like understand where she's coming from, so she can talk about things that she doesn't feel comfortable talking about with her neighbors.
That brings in what Wellman talked about the internet creating new opportunities for community instead of destroying community. It's also just a place for political junkies to get more news than they might find in the newspaper. It goes back to that Jim Neal live blog. Um, he announced in a Blue NC forum that he was gay, not in a newspaper. And so this is the kind of place where if you're really interested in North Carolina politics, you can find a lot more of it in this one place than having to comb through newspapers. A final purpose, as you can see on this page, for the site is access to candidates, to political figures, etc. That can go back to the gubernatorial debate where members of the site got to ask Bev Perdue and Richard Moore questions about their platforms before the primary elections in North Carolina. There also are a number of political figures who are registered users on the site. Wayne Goodwin, who is the state insurance commissioner, frequently posts. And it's interesting, I thought that people would be opposed to reading posts from a political figure. They read like press releases. It seems like probably his staff is doing the updates, but all of the comments seem pretty positive. It seems like people like having this sort of easy access to what the insurance commissioner is doing and saying. So what specifically are people talking about on Blue NC? Here's a post from James Protzman, who's one of the people who started the site, talking about his opposition to Senator Burr. Senator Burr backs funding for abstinence-only education, and this post says that he thinks that's ineffective. And then you see there are, I think, 8 comments total to that post. Here's another really cool example. Somebody posted that Billy Kennedy, who is a political figure involved with the Democratic Party in Western North Carolina, is considering running for Congress, running against Representative Virginia Foxx for the U.S. Congress after lots of people joined this Facebook group trying to draft him to run. And lots of the people that started that Facebook group and joined that Facebook group are Blue NC members.
That goes back to what we talked about when we listened to Clay Shirky about collective action. And this is an obvious example of members of Blue NC trying to use this community and using social networks to try and go out and change something that they don't like in the state. In this case, to try to get rid of Virginia Foxx, who they think is ineffective. A couple of other notable examples of collective action involving Blue NC. Several users of the site, a lot of people, got pretty involved in the Larry Kissel campaign trying to promote it to national attention, and he ended up ousting Robin Hayes, who'd been in Congress for quite some time. When we listened to Turner, we talked about the difference between phatic communication, just social greetings, and communication that serves a purpose. And I think that you could argue, and Blue NC people probably would, that this type of conversation about specific issues facing the state and ways to change those problems probably doesn't fall into the phatic communication category. While we're on the subject of what people talk about, it's probably a good point to bring up the question of trustworthiness of the news information that's presented on the site. When we listened to Manju's talk, he talked about truthiness and the trouble with people turning to sort of one-sided media sources, and I think that that's definitely a legitimate complaint or problem that Blue NC could face. As more people rely on this sort of one-sided community of conversation, the more they turn to a place like Blue NC that has an obvious political slant for their news, the more likely it is that perhaps they could be less informed about politics in the state, or maybe they're only informed about certain issues instead of being sort of more generally prepared to participate in political discussion in the state. Another thing that's interesting to look at with Blue NC is how you define the people who are contributing to the site. Some of them have journalism background and put in a significant amount of time into reporting some of the things that they post. So there's kind of a question of, well, is this actually reporting? Gilmore talked about reporting that acknowledges bias, and so maybe you could see it as fitting that kind of category, which obviously brings up the question of, you're acknowledging that bias, but how do you know what you can trust on the site and what you can't?
There's also this interesting discussion on the site about what citizen journalism really means and whether the participants even want to be considered citizen journalists. So it's an interesting discussion about how the participants define themselves and how we should define them. That brings us pretty much to the end of this little run through of what's on BlueNC, but I wanted to finish it up by showing you the competition. I considered doing this project comparing BlueNC and Conservative NC, which is a newer site that I really don't know that much about, but it was modeled after BlueNC. It's supposed to be sort of like the conservative version of BlueNC, and I think it operates pretty similarly. I'm interested to hear what you guys think of my talk.